I always joke with people that they're never going to see anything on the set that isn't in our apartment. Somewhere.
We're Inside Vancouver Opera, and I'm Ashley Daniel Foote, your regular host. Today's episode is truly a special one, featuring two of Canada's most celebrated artists and creative minds, director Maurice Panych and set designer Ken MacDonald. Partners in both life and art, their extraordinary collaboration has shaped some of the most memorable moments in Canadian theatre and opera. Leading today's conversation is Vancouver Opera's own General Director Tom Wright, who has worked closely with Maurice and Ken over the years. So let's dive right in, and here's Tom's conversation with Maurice Panych and Ken MacDonald.
How do you design a set that reflects both the practical aspects of an airport and the emotional lives of the characters that are in it?
Every show that I design, I build a little white model box in the size, into scale of what the particular stage will be. And I have a little gooseneck lamp that shines from one angle so I get nice shadows, and I just start cutting paper and folding paper. And in this case, I had looked at this beautiful TWA 1950s amazing airport that is quite iconic, and we thought that would be kind of fun. And we liked the idea of glass and seeing outside and seeing projections and the control tower that spins. And so everything is kind of based on an organic kind of look. And now for the QE Theatre, because it's so much bigger, we're extending some of the wings and it's these curved glass panels, and so I'm actually making them look a little bit like dove's wings. It's not really obvious, but they have these curves that create.
No, but we liked the idea of wings because it was like escape and freedom, and it really feels like, so, talking emotionally, that's one of the first things you pick up on is that
he's trapped in there, but
also the opera's composer's name is Dove.
That's very true.
So balancing realism and abstraction. Did you find opportunities to introduce more abstract or symbolic elements into the design?
Well, yeah, it's not realistic. I mean, the ceiling is warped like this, the panels are. But the control tower is based on a sense of realism, except for it's actually sort of inside. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, that's completely unreal because the control tower should be out there somewhere.
Yes.
But because the controller sings, well, she has to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've looked at other versions of this show, and it's always so strange, to see, like whenever I design a set, if it isn't the first time that it's ever been done, then I try not to look at anything until I've come up with an idea. And then you go, oh, what do other people do? Maybe I can steal a little bit.
It's important to steal other people's ideas.
It is very important. Yeah. But I didn't from anybody on this one. It's quite different, I think, from other productions.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you can not steal, like what would be the opposite of stealing? Watching it and going, let's not do that.
Yeah.
I love the design. We love it at Vancouver Opera. We're celebrating our 65th anniversary season this year. The company started in the 60s. The first production, Deflator Mouse, takes place in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
Costumes are from the 60s. Our second production of the season, Flight, set in the 60s. So homage to the 60s, to the birth of Vancouver Opera.
Yeah.
The costumes, too. Now, we don't have our costume designer with us here today, but that's a creative process that you both go through.
Right.
Well, I think she just riffed on the whole 60s feeling of it, the TWA airport, the style of it, the period, and she kind of we just encouraged her to go in that direction.
And we didn't keep to a limited palette. Sometimes we keep to a kind of a limited palette, but because it's 60s, it was more colorful. There were pinks and greens.
Yeah. And I wanted to play around with it choreographically because I thought we could create magical elements where people appeared out of nowhere by using all the luggage carts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that activity.
We stole that again in Frankenstein when we did Frankenstein last year in Stratford. This great big luggage cart comes on. Someone's walking right behind it, and then all of a sudden it disappears, and that person, you didn't see how they got on stage. It's quite nice.
I seem to remember some luggage carts moving in Overcoat.
Oh, quite possibly.
That's our thing, We always stairs and luggage carts. That's our thing. Yeah.
Ken, do you have career highlights in theater and opera?
You know what? Opera is somewhat new to me to be designing for, and I'm really loving it because it can be so abstract. We just did Marriage of Figaro, and I based it on Jean Moreau, and it's all abstract. And I could never do that for a normal play, but you can sort of, and same with Flight, it's so sort of fanciful.
I think the thing about opera is it's part of what's expected, I think. People expect something that's showier. And
you want to see it. If I'm going to an opera, I don't want to see a chair and a brown curtain.
I wish more theater was like that.
Oh, me too.
Because it's...
And the scale?
Yeah, the scale is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's just such big emotions and big music. And so you can do this big set kind of thing, Career highlights. Well, I think some of the shows that 7 Stories probably kind of changed my life because when I designed that and then it got seen, it was the first time I had an agent. Somebody came up to me and said, I'd like to represent you. And you go, oh, really? Okay. So then I began to realize that I could design not necessarily in a realistic way, and I'm not known kind of for it not being, I do a box set. I just did Leopoldstadt at the Huntington that's on right now in Boston. And it is a box set. It's all curved. It's all Art Nouveau, and it's very pretty and elegant. And I can do that kind of set. But the most fun is to do something kind of crazy and wild, like when we did Frankenstein last year. Just one great big circle with things moving in and very abstract.
I wish I had seen that production. I hear it was brilliant.
It was really
fun. Great, I have to say, even if I do say so myself.
We were very, very proud of that.
Flight combines humor with deeper themes of displacement, isolation. How do you, as a director, navigate the tension between comedy and the pathos in such work?
Well, in many ways, it's not really... I have to trust what's going on that's already written, the musically, story-wise. And so my job, especially with opera singers, because there's this triple layer of things that have to be considered, is to help them focus on what the story is and what the reasons are for them to be there. And so, and I know that sounds like an easy thing, but actors constantly need to be reminded why they're in a scene, or to ask themselves why they're in the scene, what motivates them to sing the way they sing, because otherwise it can seem very isolated and unconnected to the rest of the story. So I figure my main job is to help the singers, actors, stay with what's already written and make it believable. Even if it's funny or comical or whatever, to try and make it believable. And that's tricky because you're asking, for example, I was talking to you earlier about the countertenor, making that sound believable. Why? So you have to get with the actor and talk about the sound itself and why the actor might be making that sound, or, and so why these things are going on and for what reason and how they support the story itself, but also make it believable, because there's nothing, I don't think, worse in comedy than when you don't believe it. It has to be really connected to what's going on in the story.
And it's about the truth. That's you have to have the truth.
Yeah. And I think opera singers are really attuned to listening to that now, because they feel like they want to be good actors, and singing is part of it. But as I say, there are multiple levels to creating. I'm always fascinated by people like dancers or opera singers, for example, who have this extra athletic level of skill, and how difficult and complicated it is for them to create that sound when at the same time trying to pretend they're really in a story and that the story is really happening in a kind of a normal way. So, because it's extraordinary, the sound, the output is extraordinary, the physical demands are extraordinary. So I love working on it.
And you and Ken have worked for a long time.
For too long.
Prolific working relationship, one might say. Can you share how your collaborations have evolved?
I always joke with people that they're never going to see anything on the set that isn't in our apartment somewhere.
Yeah.
Ken has often gone out. When we did Susanna, actually, at the opera.
At Vancouver Opera back
That's right, but way back.
2000 something.
Still one of my favorite experiences. Ken went out into the back garden and he snapped a branch off of a tree and brought it inside and painted it white. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But they built, in Seattle, they built that that thing. It was
it was a lilac tree from Corey, who lived next door to us, and I just picked it up and I stripped all the things and I painted it blue.
Oh, blue, sorry.
And I set it in the box and went, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it was 75 feet long and 25 or 30 feet high in 3D, carved out of wire and foam. And it was beautiful.
We always tell this story too. It's kind of funny, but Ken was designing Design for Living at the Shaw Festival, and he did these
windows, kind of like
anchor windows, kind of overcoaty, and and he got my feedback, which is pretty blunt. And I said, well, you've done this set 500 times. So he got mad at me, and he crumpled it up and threw it on the floor, and we both went, oh.
Well, I remember it as that you went, well, and I sort of thought, I just don't like it, because I knew I'd done it before. And when we put it back crumpled in, it was kind of fantastic. And it takes place in Paris, New York
and London.
Yeah. So then I did the Eiffel Tower like this, and everything bent, and you saw it through. And they had to bring it in on a crane to get it into back
through the roof.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
So when I've designed everything Morris has ever written or directed. I think we've done over 125 shows now together, probably.
Wow.
So when he's writing a new play, like he's working on a new musical he's writing right now, I'm already thinking about the design. So, not that will influence anything, but it might. I might say, but I've got a real lead into it because I've read page 10, page 20, as it goes along.
Right.
It's funny too, when you work in enough places, that you start to think, what space could this work in the best? Like what's great about doing a flight, for instance, at VOA is that the space is so big and expansive, it can really create a sense of that size. You wouldn't do that,
I'm adding extra wings
at
to
Granville Island Arts Club.
Or the Shaw Festival.
No.
Last Call, your breakout play?
Yeah.
Bringing you to national attention. Looking back, how do you feel your approach to storytelling has changed since then? And maybe, since we've talked about it, where you are with upcoming projects.
That was my first thing. I mean, I had written a couple other terrible little plays before that nobody will ever see.
Or do.
Last Call was and I was young enough and naive enough to think it might work, and it did.
Did you see it?
I did not, no.
And we tell the story all the time. I said to Ken, I'm going to write a musical. And
this is like 1982.
And he said, well, okay, whatever. And he said, I'm going to go out shopping with his friend Sheila McCarthy, his friend. And they're going to go out shopping. And I was like, okay, when you come back. Anyway, so I wrote the lyrics to this song.
The first song of the show.
And I put it on the piano. And when he came home, I said, okay, you have to write the music for that now. And he was, I never heard such moaning. He was like,
well, I'd never written anything. I'd written one stupid little song for a show called North Shore Live that Nikki Cavendish sang. It was like a 4-line ditty. I wasn't a composer. I didn't know how.
Right.
But I realized I could do it. And so I sat down and wrote that first song. I went, okay. And so we did about 8 to 10 songs. The woman who lived above us, our landlady, was below us. She was the general manager, I guess, of Tamadou's Theater.
Yeah, that's right.
She heard us playing the piano and singing.
And she said, what are you doing? We said, well, come upstairs and hear. And so she listened to these songs and she said, okay, I'm going to go to Tamadou's and tell them. So we went to Tamadou's and we showed them these 8 songs and kind of fleshed out what might be the story. And they went, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah.
You have to just finish it. And we were like, I went home and I was sick on the sofa for about 6 days. I couldn't get up. I was so terrified of having to create this thing. Anyway, we did it. And it was a big hit in Vancouver and like an unbelievable hit.
And we did a CBC special of it, which we can't find.
In terms of storytelling, I think that I've tried many different avenues of storytelling. Mm-hmm. I think that was my first attempt. It has kind of like a lot of, young ideas in it, and but I haven't really matured that much. I'm still basically a child at heart, and I don't know that I take writing as seriously as I should, because for me it always should have an element of whimsy and lightness and kind of like and a little bit of sweet melancholy. But I think all of that has to do with skipping over the top. And people accuse me of not going very deep with my writing, but I think there are enough people doing that.
You have written many plays. Many have been produced around the world. How many, like 7 Stories, has it been translated into?
7 Stories has been translated a lot, not my most. Vigil is my most translated play. I think it has, there's 26, in 26 languages.
Wow.
Vigil. Yeah.
Are you always invited to come out for premieres?
I wish.
In Japan.
In Japan we were, and it was great.
In Tokyo.
Our friend Yoshi, he's around Vancouver quite a bit. He actually, the way Yoshi learned English was Bill Millard at the Arts Club told him, go see plays. So he went to see Last Call 40 times.
Yeah, he went every night.
And I don't know how he learned English.
And Talking Dirty.
Yeah, and Talking Dirty.
Those were the 2 shows that were on.
Can you imagine? That's your English? Anyway, so I was like, oh, where are you from? Anyway, when he translated Vigil, he invited us to come to see it at the National Theatre in Tokyo. And it was a big deal. And we went to see it, and it was a great trip.
What a great way to see Japan.
Yeah, because he hosted us, and it was really lovely. Yeah. But that was quite fascinating. Although watching it was excruciating because the blackouts. There's like, I don't know if people that don't know
39
Vigil.
Or 40.
I think there's 38 blackouts, and in the Tokyo production, every blackout was about 25 to 50 seconds long. Oh, I know. And he had to take my hand, Yoshi, and hold it. And he said, it's okay. In Japan, people like blackouts. I'm like, okay, well, my heart was palpitating. It was like, but anyway.
All that has to happen in these blackouts, I've designed this show 8 times, is maybe a piece of knitting has to get bigger. So literally she has to reach under the pillow and grab another piece. Time has gone by.
Yeah.
Oh, no. This would be someone would come out in silhouette. You'd see them and they would bring out another piece of material. Like 40 seconds later, you go, what? She just had to reach under her pillow.
Yeah.
And the woman who played the lead, she did not. She was a very famous movie star in Japan.
TV star, yeah.
TV star. So people came dressed in full, incredible kimonos to meet her. And the backstage was filled with orchids and things, right?
Yeah.
But she didn't want to lie in a bed because I guess that was inelegant. So even though the old woman in the show is dying and lying in bed, so she sat in a chair with a little sort of ottoman. It was very regal.
Throughout your career, from 7 Stories to The Overcoat and beyond, absurdity has played a crucial role in your work. How do you use an absurd lens to reveal deeper truths about the human condition?
Well, the human condition is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we alive if we're only going to die? But, so that's the first basic premise.
Yeah.
And the rest sort of follows out from there. I mean, I don't think I need to convince anybody right now who's following the political landscape how absurd the world is. And things happen that are out of our control. And as much as, and that's the absurdity of it, we can't control a lot of those things. I was talking to someone just last night, in fact, about climate change. And climate change is something we control, but we can control to a certain degree. But can we really? Because there's so many people who need to do certain things to get up to the standard of living that they need to. But beyond climate control, beyond the climate change that's happening, there are things happening to the world. I was reading about the change of current in the Atlantic Ocean. That change of current is happening not because of something we're doing. It's happening because it happened 11,000 years ago before recorded history, right. And it's re-happening. So it's reshaping the climate of the Earth. I mean, we're not helping, but we're speeding up the process. There are certain things we can't do. And I don't know, I can't believe I ended up with the environment talking about absurdity. But I'm saying that there's things we just can't control, and so it's absurd to even try to control them. So we live in this kind of bubble of wisdom and knowledge that is in many ways useful, but in some ways completely useless.
And that wraps up this special episode of Inside Vancouver Opera. A heartfelt thank you to Morris Panych and Ken MacDonald for sharing their incredible stories and insights, and to General Director Tom Wright for guiding such a fascinating conversation. Don't forget to get your tickets for Flight on stage February 8th to 16th at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. Tickets and information at vancouveropera.ca. As always, thanks to my trusty producer Mac McGilvery, and I'll see you at the opera.